Hey guys, Bowie here. This video is brought to you by Analog and me. We decided to create something never done in video format before. The Bible of the Mid Lane is a collection of information mainly brought to you by Analog and then condensed into a well-thought format that anyone can use to become a better player. In this video he's revealing tips, sometimes even secrets and details that very few mid players have the courage to or the ability to express well. TA is one of the hardest iconic matchups versus Shadow Fiend, but in this video, Analog and me will give you tons of ways to make it feasible. The way to make the matchup easier starts with the item and skill build for it. The item build can be seen here, and the most different thing is probably the mangoes. Note that Analog also starts with mangoes queued up, and that's because your first skill point is raise, but we will expand on the skill build later on. Let's talk wards and block first. The ward should cover the rune in the lane since TA is a ranged hero, and blocking according to Analog isn't necessarily better than not blocking. SF is a hero that can easily get first blood when you start with raise level 1, so if you think that's possible, go aid your team, but don't waste your mana. Before we touch upon anything, I think we have to present something that Analog calls the perfect level 1 lane. This is a really important concept in any hero. How do you get to level 2 as soon as the first 4 creeps die? That's what you want in every game, in every lane, but SF, because of his awful base damage, cares even more about this. Especially when you add the fact that Necromastery is a spell you get charges for, meaning the least creeps that die until you get level 2, the best, for you to start dominating the lane. The concept is simple, you identify which creep is in the front, that is going to be the first creep to die, so note how Analog already starts attacking it, then he gets the CS with raise, while drawing aggro of the other two, that he almost non-stop attacks to prep, to raise again, finally acquiring the ranged creep with another raise. This is a lot of mana and mangoes used, but it means that Analog now has 4 souls already once the second wave of creeps dies. This means better denying, better harass, and this is the core idea of playing Shadow Fiend. Obviously, we're not saying you have to use 3 raises in the second wave. If Windranger has no means to deny your creeps, or if she's focused on getting a CS of her own, try to right click. Look at the next wave. Windranger is clearly attacking SF, so he can right click this melee one. Use your judgment and make decisions for yourself. And that's enough for our crash course on Shadow Fiend. Let's go back to TA. The first step in making this laning stage less of a nightmare is creating chaos in the creep wave. We talked about Analog's tip in the Invoker video, but it doesn't hurt to talk about it again. Note how he switches the creep wave in a 90-degree angle. Not only it's way easier for him to dodge the Psyblaze like this, but when he draws aggro away to get CS, he doesn't have to worry about his tower maybe killing the creep, since Shadow Fiend has very low base damage, so that's a very smart way to go about the level 1 creep wave. That said, see how he uses raise for a melee creep? Your objective in this lane is to use the 4 mangoes as an investment for your bottle. Do not be afraid to commit raises with this build, and ideally also try to harass TA at the same time. At level 2, Analog really urges you to break refraction as much as possible, because that means your raises when you go for creeps are actually gonna damage the TA. And obviously, you will need to constantly watch TA's angle so that you're not a sitting duck for her right clicks. You basically have to try to move every time TA goes for an attack, but that doesn't really necessarily solve the problem because the angle of Psyblaze is really big. A salve might be needed depending on how good the TA you're playing against is, but don't be afraid, things start to change quite a bit at level 3. It's not worth double raising TA before you have level 3 raise. But at this stage, as long as you break the refraction, you start to actually make her fear for her life a little. Another move Analog goes for when he was low is raising the wave as he gets to the lane, while he dances around TA to get creeps. If he lets the creep wave push under his tower, not only the creeps get messy and it's harder to hit multiple creeps with raises, but TA can also dive him with the creeps and get a lot of damage with Psyblades if she's a good player. Watch how Analog gets first blood at level 3, just because he focused on attacking TA instead of denying a range creep. And, you know, this happens because TA didn't respect him, and usually TAs are not going to respect you as a Shadow Fiend, and that's where your opportunities are going to come from. The Q happens for 2 reasons. The high amount of mangoes he brings, so that he gets level 3 at a reasonable time in comparison to TA, and also to help him get the mana to then kill her, because if you use all of your mana and don't bring any mangoes, then you're just going to be a Shadow Fiend that attacks with a little bit more damage. As soon as TA pops Refraction, Analog is not worried about denying a range creep, he sees skill potential, because he's not in the mindset of this is a hard matchup, play passive. So yeah, level 3 and level 5 are great power spikes for you. Don't let TA's overconfidence get over your head, and that might change things a lot for you. Once you have Bottle, you can keep your CS up versus TA, as well as mitigate some of the inherent harass that comes from her Psyblade. Look how Analog plays once he has Bottle. He instantly raises the wave to push it, so he can get the rune. He knew TA didn't go looking for one, so it's very likely that it's up, and this is a really good tip for the waves before the 2, 4, and 6 minute timings, so that you either force TA to take harass while she drags the creeps and tries to steal your rune, or she can just choose to last hit on the tower and give the rune to you. I think we didn't mention skill build, so I will, but this is the only time we're talking about it, since it's, pretty much set in stone. Raise level 1, followed by Necromastery, raise level 3, and max raise, then Necromastery. There's one exception to this build, and it's a very specific scenario when you're against the even and easy matchups. In case you get the perfect block almost under your tower, going for Necromastery level 1 can be good if you're an experienced Shadow Fiend player that can CS level 1 with it. Analog goes for it from time to time, and it can be awesome since level 1 raise isn't that powerful, especially if you're playing against ranged heroes, but this is a hard matchup, so if you want to make it even harder, get out of the base with Necromastery instead of raises. In terms of items, you usually want to rush Bottle, finish 2 Wraith Bands, and against TA specifically, be sure to anticipate her level 6 by preemptively buying sentries. When you have no boots, playing around against a level 6 TA can be dangerous. If you're playing higher MMR games, Analog suggests that you actually get 2 sentries and save one in case it gets denied, and also buy your 5-minute ward. While you might think boots are better, look how the extra stats and attack speed allows Analog to take the refractions really fast, and eventually cripple TA as she tries to play aggressive on him. Attack speed is really good versus her when you have so many nukes, and you're also spending a lot of mana in the lane, so when you go jungling, having the attack speed actually allows you to jungle with less mana. That's why Analog recommends getting Gloves of Haste when you're starting treads. As a Shadow Fiend, you're not roaming that deep into the jungle, you want to still farm all of the wave creeps, so boots doesn't make sense to you before level 7, which is when you should really start jungling aggressively. We already touched on kill potential, but to reiterate, level 3 is a key stage. After that, your kill potential will mainly rely on your ability as a Shadow Fiend and how good a TA you're playing against. Analog constantly preemptively raised the wave when he had mana, and in occasions when he was able to land a raise prior to Reflection being used, look how his playstyle changed. He ignores the creeps completely and lays it down the TA. Understanding when creeps are important or not is the key to turn this matchup from hard to even and sometimes even easy. That said, if the TA is as good as you, chances are you'll trade a lot of harass, but you will not kill her. Alright guys, so before the next matchup, I just wanted to thank all of the positive feedback on the last Bible of the mid lane video. Analog and I are really happy with the tips and the things suggested, and if you want us to keep publishing in-depth mid-matchup content and making it even better, consider supporting us for Patreon. Zeus as a hard matchup is probably going to be controversial, and that's because most Zeus players have no idea how strong of a laner he is. He is one of the few heroes that have early burst damage on Shadow Fiend to kill him in the laning stage, and that's a big reason as to why he's here. A very common mistake Zeus players do in this matchup is that they get way too focused in getting creeps with Arc Lightning instead of harassing the Shadow Fiend and getting creeps with less hits, which is pretty easy. But yeah, going back to what Shadow Fiend can do to mitigate Zeus. The item build is the one showed here. I know that the stick early might seem controversial, but fear not, because Analog himself tested both of them. If you're a higher MMR player and knows that good Zeus nowadays actually spam way more Lightning Bolt on you than Arc Lighting to farm creeps, you're gonna be confused. That said, as a Shadow Fiend in this lane, there's 2 things that you want. You want creeps, and you want not to die. Stick early gives you both the mana to harass and get CS, but also mitigates your spending on mangoes and salves that you would spend anyways, because you're probably using a lot of raises in this lane. And this is a lane you want bottle ASAP. So, that's why the stick is here. But yeah, you're probably going to be forced into a bracer before the bottle, and that's why you don't leave the base with Slippers of Agility, and you get the circling stat. Your ward can cover the lane if you want to, but you have to remember it's quite easy for Zeus to accidentally find it with Lightning Bolt, so ward away from the little lane square, and Analog just prefers to ward the cliff instead. Skill build wise, there's no doubt Raze is much superior in this lane. Raze not only allows you to fight against Zeus incredibly high damage, but your harass potential on such a short range hero might delay his bottle, because he might be forced to buy a salve or a mango to, play as aggressive as you are playing. Your playstyle in the lane is survive until bottle, and actually survive in general. You will fare a decent amount of salves and mangoes if the enemy Zeus is good, so in general, if you think you can get away with bottle by only eating your 2 branches with tangles, go for it, but that probably means the enemy Zeus is brain dead. Now, just to be very specific, this matchup is all about how good the enemy is and how much pressure you are feeling. If you're not feeling pressured, bottle is actually not your best option in this matchup. Bracer plus Wraith Band means that Zeus is wasting mana on you, not killing you, while you get every creep and every deny because it's unsustainable for him to have mana for Lightning Bolt on you and Arc Lighting on creeps. So if you get a couple of good early levels and you want to milk this matchup as much as possible, Analog suggests that you grow a pair of balls, fair region, and just dominate the CS game. The mentality of the TA matchup was literally spam raises to get creeps at all times, since raises rarely affect TA and since getting close at almost any time could mean more damage done to you. That's not how this matchup works. After getting level 2 with the perfect lane trick using your raises, Analog suggests you draw aggro to get most of your creeps. Zeus' damage is high, but his attack range is awful, so hold more onto the raises and try to use them when you can harass Zeus and get creeps at the same time. One thing to mention, especially if the Zeus is good, is that Lightning Bolt has way bigger cast range than most people know, so be wary of that when salving. One big tip from Analog is when you know that Zeus has bottle already, choose a lane to sit preemptly before the rune spawns. In general, you're not going to be super healthy, so trying to contest it after it shows can be really dangerous, and while it's unreliable, it's still the best thing you can do most of the time to maybe deny the rune against him. As you get level 2 and 3 raise, always try to get that first raise as the creeps come to the lane. Good players have the habit of blocking the creeps as it comes to the lane, and using raise preemptly not only hits Zeus, but now it dissuades him from staying closer, allowing you to quickly kill the creeps whilst minimizing the time you have to spend close to Zeus, getting lightning bolted. By doing that, you can now block your next creep wave to be in a slightly safer position or stack a nearby camp. That said, don't bother farming it until you're level 7 because it's really bad mana-wise. There's always skill potential in Dota, but most of the time, it will come from Zeus making a mistake and being lenient with positioning or bringing regen, than something you can actually prepare for. Shadow Fiend vs Lina is an iconic matchup everyone knows about. Lina is a range hero, so your ward is going to cover rune and lane. Analog urges you to use the level 1 concept in this matchup. Not only because you want to be level 2 in the second wave, but because if you don't clear the creeps fast enough, you get punished really hard against Lina because even under your tower, she has the attack range to be a pain in the butt. The whole idea of this matchup is to avoid Lina. You want to spend as little time close to her because just like Zeus, she has much more reach than you and a lot of burst damage. Analog explained to me that the difference between the Lina and the Zeus matchup is that Lina harasses you with Dragon's Glaive as she pushes the wave. This makes it almost impossible for SF to have rune control, while Zeus, if he's using Lightning Bolt, he cannot really push the wave as fast as you with Arc Lighting. This matchup is all about jungling, but since you don't have rune control, Wraith Bands are the item you have to go for instead of a bottle. In a usual lane, you should be able to get a Wraith Band and then fare yourself a Tango plus a stick. Extra mangoes and salves might be included during this purchase, so always make sure you use your courier well since it takes a lot of time for it to get to you. All you want is to get level 5 ASAP so that you can almost double raise a wave and only have to tank one Dragon's Glaive. Since Analog constantly jungles after clearing the wave, he can use clarities that are much more efficient than mangoes. So buy clarities as you get to level 5, 7. Don't be afraid to fare salves because you want to address the lane before the creeps start hitting your tower. And that's super important because kinda like Pugna, Lina does a lot of damage to your towers. Sometimes when he was late for the wave, he would purposely wait for Lina to use Dragon's Glaive to get a range creep so he could keep his clarities and save a raindrop charge. And yeah, raindrop is mega core in this matchup. For Analog, one of the most crucial points in this laning stage is defending the catapult wave at 530 while being healthy in HP. The reason for that is Lina is usually going to be level 6 at that time, so while you want to defend, you also don't want to die. Using the glyph to pressure the tower more or dive you is a very common trick good players can use, so be ready. Besides that, jungle your heart out while addressing every wave preemptly and make sure you have 180 mana every time you go mid or else you will take unnecessary damage from Lina. This is exactly how your interactions with Lina should look like after level 7. The last thing we're going to talk about are some details that Analog reminded me that can happen in your laning stage. Since you don't want to take Dragon's Glaives to your face, drawing aggro is a good idea so that you get CS without being denied, and also escape danger. That said, when Lina does exactly the same, your range creep stays too far away for you to raise, so a good idea is to walk forward as he's about to die, so maybe you get the raise or at least you get the experience, even if he gets denied. Another small tip from Analog is to salve after the wave dies, because in some cases, even when you try your best to be in experience range and away from Dragon's Glaive, the cast range can play tricks on you. As you jungle, make sure to lose the habit of only going back to the lane after you finish the whole camp. But you're not going to clear a camp with less hits this fast, this soon into the game, so just take your time and slowly accelerate. This matchup is rough as hell, but it doesn't mean Viper is invincible. In fact, as with all the matchups we showed so far, you can kill Viper at level 3 when you utilize the perfect level 1 tip Analog gave us. The opener, block, and ward is really standard, mango into double mango. For Analog, the key aspect of this matchup is not being close to the lane until creeps are about to die, or else you're just gonna give Viper a bunch of stacks for free. See how Analog only moves when the range creep is almost dead to then raise it? So yeah, Analog mainly played it like that, never allowing the range creep to get denied, and watch what he does here. He's close to level 3. Ideally, you always want to use level 2 raises over level 1 raises, right? But in this specific scenario, where Viper and Shadow Fiend have pretty much the same experience, by using the low level ones and hitting the Viper at the same time to kill the creeps, he builds stacks and 1 level advantage. It's just beautiful. Watch how he moves after the long raise, already fully aware on the trap he set Viper in. But this is an outlier. Let's see another attempt at this matchup. One really good trick to force Viper out of position and take less damage overall against heroes with more range than you is positioning yourself diagonally to the enemy, since a straight line in between you will be longer, and thus harder for Viper to constantly spam his nod on you. See where Analog positions himself here? Drawing aggro is almost a must early on, where you're not able to just shove the wave really quickly and run to the jungle. Your item build this game is usually going to rely on finishing your band and getting a salve. Analog likes to go for it because Viper has awful base damage in comparison to you as you acquire souls, so you can start to get some denies as well as jungle more efficiently. So not only got Shadow Fiend killing Viper in this matchup, but we have another tip from Analog himself, and it's kind of specific, but I think it's really cool. While Bottle is awful when you're playing Shadow Fiend versus Viper, Analog does go for one after the solo kill. First, why is it so bad? Well, at daytime, Viper, as soon as he sees you walk into a rune without creeps to defend yourself, he will chase and probably kill you. That's it. It's just that dumb. It's terrible, and it doesn't allow you to fight him back. When Analog gets this kill though, the stars align in a very specific way. First of all, it's 4 minutes. Viper is dealing with a pushing wave on his tower. What this means is that it's harder and costly for Viper to stop you from getting this rune because he's gonna take a lot of creep damage, he might lose CS. So now Analog's getting double the bottle heal, which is amazing. This is a really good trick that works for a lot of heroes. On top of that, all of the following runes will be under night, so it's harder for Viper to stop you from getting bottle. Even if he has a ward in the rune, he's only gonna see you when you're about to pick it up. He's not gonna be able to chase you because you're probably gonna be jungling, so you're not gonna come from lane vision into the rune. Going back to Viper though, while Viper doesn't draw aggro when he attacks you with his Q, the advantage that the raise build has over Viper is that you clear the wave really fast, and thus there are going to be so many creeps versus Viper that yeah, he doesn't draw aggro to attack you, but when no creeps are there, they will just aggro to Viper, and he's going to take a lot of damage, he has awful armor, and if he tries and tanks through the creeps to hit you, that's a bad trade on 100% unless you gave him unnecessary stacks. Avoid him when he tries to close the gap and just shove the waves versus him. That way, you will take less harass, and when you're out of mana, Analog suggests you to draw aggro like a champ, and you know, practicing aggro a little bit in a lobby goes a long way, because you're gonna have to use that perfect 500 range aggro if you wanna take as little damage as possible. See how he was diagonally positioned to the Viper when he walks to draw aggro? That's the difference between 1 hit or 3 hits. Going back to the Wraith Bands versus Bottle conversation, watch this fight here. Viper could have probably played this a little better so he doesn't take the short raise, maybe, but level 5 is usually your last chance of killing Viper, and I don't even dare you to try it. He was the one that actually man up here, and we're talking when both of you are full HP and mana. Note that this kill only happened because of the Wraith Bands and Fairy Fire. Bottle here would have been certain death, completely useless. That said, while you can kill Viper with these tips, one thing you need to learn is how broken this hero is and how you play around it. Here we have Analog with Treads, 2 levels ahead of the Viper, and see what happens when Poison Attack is max. This hero is a beast once he gets his hands on you, but the trade-off from the old Viper skill build is the fact that he has literally no AoE now. Unlike Lina, he's a hero that wants to control the lane, and if he's good, he might even farm the lane while sitting in your high ground, making it almost impossible for you to get into the lane. Respect him and go jungle. Don't even bother. That said, this opens up the opportunity for support TP rotations if you ask for one, and if he doesn't posture super aggressively at level 5+, you can try and double raise the wave really quickly right at the start and get out to the jungle. Kunkka is one of the few melee heroes we consider to be an even matchup versus Shadow Fiend. Analog's tip for this lane is just memorize Tidebringer. Learning the cooldown at all levels and memorizing it is the best way to play versus Kunkka. The reason a lot of people suffer against the hero is that we all are used to trying to hang around the enemy when your creeps are still alive to try and squeeze a deny here and there, but that's a big mistake versus him, especially if you don't know when Tidebringer was used. Kunkka preferred to lose the range creep for harass on Shadow Fiend early, but that also allowed him to bait Shadow Fiend as he attempted a deny. In the next wave, watch how Analog now understands he has to back. As Kunkka gets more levels, you want to start avoiding the first Tidebringer, and Analog finds ways to compensate for the missed CS like stacking for himself. There's a timing window from level 3 to level 5 when Kunkka has double Bracer and Blaze of Attack, and at that stage he can actually one-shot the range creep when he attacks a melee one, but before that he can't, so Kunkka will try to find different angles to hit you without allowing you to deny the range creep, so try to predict. Sometimes you can actually dodge it, but it's not that easy. In general, this matchup looks very similar to Lina, but with the upside that he's melee, and the Tidebringer cooldown early on is not nearly as low as Dragon Slave. That said, you just want to avoid him as much as possible in jungle. Unlike Lina and Pugna, Kunkka doesn't threaten your towers nearly as much, so you can be slightly more lenient with how much you jungle and when you address the wave pushing. That said, good Kunkka, especially because they are tanky and Tidebringer cost no mana, can contest your stacks. By the way, watch how Analog actually backs and leaves the range creep to Kunkka because he has no mana to secure it and he doesn't want to tank another Tidebringer. And in these scenarios, you're probably better off just ignoring him like Analog does in display, rather than fighting him unless you have decent mana levels. Avoiding Tidebringer is your priority. See how he ignores the range creep here? He's pretty sure Kunkka will not get the deny, and the damage he takes from Tidebringer is not worth the gold, because that's like 50 gold, but he probably takes around 200 damage from one attack. Kunkka is another hero SF is forced to go raindrops. While Tidebringer is physical damage, both deals a ton of magical damage, and it's reliable enough to land. So as soon as Kunkka gets boots, which is around level 5 to 6, you need to have raindrops. In this specific case, Analog doesn't have raindrops close to the time he thinks Kunkka will get 6, so be very careful with the specific timing because being close to Kunkka now is suicidal. The fact that Analog doesn't show when he doesn't have raindrops and Kunkka might be 6 is key, and you really need to learn this. By respecting Kunkka, he acquires his raindrop whilst he survives the most threatening part of the matchup. Very similarly to the Lina matchup, catapult time is key in handling this matchup, and unlike Lina, Analog doesn't even have the luxury to preemptively raise the wave. Kunkka here already one-shots the range creep, whereas Lina needs one attack plus Dragon Slave for it, so he will always take the harass damage, meaning when he addresses the wave here, the tower is already taking catapult damage. Kunkka has both, so he really wants to kill you now. And this is why Analog pots, even though he is not that low in HP. What you need to understand about Kunkka is that his kill potential is completely dependent on creeps. A great example can be seen here. When the level 6 Kunkka hits through a unit, Shadow Fiend takes about 200 damage, but only deals 100 when he directly attacks the Shadow Fiend. So that's why Analog can go forward here. Tidebringer is on cooldown, and there is only a catapult that will die in seconds, whereas going for the next wave is the risky part, and thus, he chills. So that's how you play versus Kunkka, very similar to Lina, but with the luxury, I guess, of being allowed to jungle more, and still get the creeps under tower without that much fear. In general, a good Kunkka understands that as long as you ignore the middle of the lane, he will not kill you. So what he can do is steal the opposite creep camp while you jungle, or rotate with his ult to side lanes. Just for teaching purposes, Kunkka makes the not so good play of going for a kill attempt without creeps, when Shadow Fiend is almost full and with raindrops, and you can clearly see he lacks the damage, but watch how Analog doesn't triple raise him or whatever, first because the creep wave is coming, and secondly because of the run buff. You will not kill him, he has 2 bracers, so that mana is better spent accelerating in the jungle. The Pugna versus Shadow Fiend matchup is quite interesting. While you lane reasonably well versus him, he has skill potential on you at level 6, unlike you. For this matchup, your item build is the one you can see, and your ward is the standard one versus range heroes with vision of the lane and the rune. If you pay attention, your item build in this matchup is slightly different than the TA one, and that's because we're not rushing bottles. So Analog swaps one mango for a branch, and you still fare double mangoes after the laning stage starts. Your playstyle in this lane is quite straightforward. Pugna doesn't hurt you that much, and neither does Zeus, since it has very decent attack range and he's quite speedy, meaning it's easy to miss raises you normally land on slower heroes. One thing about Pugna vs Shadow Fiend for you is that normally Pugna has a way to prevent heroes from getting the range creep, but the crap doesn't help in this case, since you have the raises. He might still do it on melee creeps, like we see here, and as long as you have more mana to get the next range creep of the following wave, it's okay to raise for it, especially if you can hit both Pugna and the creep. Don't be shy to raise early, especially level 2 onwards, because you're building souls that will allow you to get CS normally once your damage surpasses Pugna. One cool trick Analog tries to do is always run after a CS or a deny when he knows that other creeps are low, because that's when Pugna wants to use his blast in the wave. Another thing you have to be really attentive is the moment Pugna will the crab blast on you. That's a lot of damage and you don't want to take it without responding. When Analog sees Pugna running at him, he instantly reacts to the blast animation to fire back at him. This is especially relevant because seconds before, he raises the melee creeps plus Pugna, and that's one thing Analog was really adamant about. Once you hit one raise, you really want to hit more because of the stack counter. At this stage, Analog would probably land the range creep CS with a right click here, but he knows Pugna's in the high ground still with counters, so he goes for another one. In this wave, he used 4 raises. He might be out of mana, but since he has 17 creeps, he can easily CS with his attacks and he's pressuring a lot. Usually, Analog gets the raindrop right around the 3-minute mark, but this lobby had a bug, and he gets it as soon as he can. That item is key versus Pugna, and also ties with why he doesn't go bottom. Analog's explanation for not going bottom is the following. Basically, Pugna is faster than you, he has a slow, and while you can contest him in the rune, he has a higher chance of getting it usually. Then, you add the fact that when you get runes, the likelihood of you rotating increases, but that plays right into Pugna's hands. Yeah, you might get a haste and kill a Crystal Maiden, but is that worth half of your tower's HP? You can see that the playstyle Analog goes for in this game rarely deviates from this nearby creep camp. He addresses the lane as the creeps meet, instead of as they are hitting his tower, and that's important because Pugna can blast at least one time until you get rid of the creeps. When you're dedicating so much time in the tower, it means you won't be needing gallons of mana. In fact, you can see that he right-clicks a lot of the creeps to save the mana so that he can easily clear it away with a double raise, preventing Pugna from having creeps tanking as he blasts the tower. Since you're attacking them, the Wraith Bands are awesome because they amplify your bonus attack damage, and they're also really good stats versus Pugna. See how Analog is constantly panning to Pugna even as he jungles? That's to make sure he will address the lane at the right time. When Pugna goes on to the Shadow Fiend, watch how the stats and raindrops make a huge difference. At this point, you don't really want to interact with the Pugna too much. You want to accelerate in the jungle as you address every wave versus him. Bringing regen definitely is mandatory, but if it's around the 7-minute mark, you can always try to keep the pressure up. So yeah, there's not a lot of kill potential here. Pugna just blasts the wave. Make sure to control the rune versus him as we already talked about. Get your 5-minute ward. And eventually Pugna will rotate to a side lane and you can decide whether you have enough resources to react or you want to shove middle while you also accelerate in the jungle. Why is this matchup easy, you might be wondering? Windranger is a bursty hero, she has good attack range, but here's the thing, Windrun, which is usually how Windranger gets her edge in any lane, sucks against Shadow Fiend. If she gets in closer to harass with Windrun, she gets double raised, and kinda like Shadow Fiend, Windranger is squishy, so she gets really punished. Her kill potential that comes with the ult plus Windrun diving is suicide against the Shadow Fiend, as long as he takes care of his mana, which you will. But yeah, enough explaining, let's talk Dota. The initial items are the ones in the screen, and your ward is quite straightforward. In terms of playing this lane, there's not a lot of secrets. This is a clip where Analog perfectly executes the concept we talked about level 1 raise. The only real threat Windranger has against you is Power Shot, and the skill is easy enough to dodge. Good Windrangers will use it to secure the range creep, since after level 2 you already start to pack a good punch in terms of damage. And you can deny most of them with ease, just be careful, don't align for the power shot. As long as you pay attention to the range creep's HP and Windranger's stance, since the spell has a pretty telling animation, you will be fine. Your hero starts to get a real advantage over Windranger when you get to level 3. In this stage, Windranger can't really trade at you because if she is in attack distance of your hero, she's bound to take damage. That said, watch how Analog goes about harassing Windranger. He raises even though he could have double raised, but because the debuff lasts for 8 seconds, once she gets for the range creep, he can easily land a medium range raise, securing a range creep and harassing her at the same time. Avoid double raising when there's no creeps involved, especially early on when you lack resources and base damage, so that you don't get behind in experience if the Ginger Girl gets some denies she shouldn't get. Going back at the whole avoiding power shot thing, watch how the matchup sucks for Windranger. She gets one range creep but has to get close for the other one. Most heroes won't be able to punish Windranger this much. Shadow Fiend, on the other hand, if Windranger doesn't understand the matchup versus Shadow Fiend, will learn how to respect you after this game. In terms of itemization, this lane is supposed to be really easy for you, so getting a Wraith Band so you can dominate the CS game and create a real net worth difference between you and her is ideal. As long as you get used to playing versus her, you should rarely get hit by Power Shot, and the extra damage and attack speed from Wraith Band allows you to snowball quite a bit. Analog doesn't go bottom in this matchup, for pretty much the same reasons as he doesn't go against Pugna. Windranger is faster than you, has a slow and a stun, and it's unlikely she will lose runes to you if she's smart, and we want to be prepared to play against the really good guys. On top of that, Wraith Band gives you the deny advantage we talked about, whilst you can fare a couple of early mangoes to pressure Windranger no problem. In this footage, Analog forgot to ward the lane actually, so I'm here to tell you to make sure to get a 5-minute ward and a 0-minute one versus Windranger, because the only threat this hero poses are the hidden full channel power shots, and a ward is key in identifying that. Make sure to get the deepest one you can. As long as you don't tank them, this matchup is really easy. Analog went Bracer in this game because he thought the matchup was harder than anticipated, but in his opinion, you can go double Wraith Band no problemo if you're confident you can dodge her W reliably. Kill potential against Windranger starts at level 3, and the whole concept on how to kill her stems from forcing Windrun. As long as the spell is not available, whenever Windranger goes for a creep, she might be in danger, and you can use your move speed advantage to kill her. Another reason Analog explained to me SF is really good versus Windranger is that a lot of greedy players are used to rushing Javelin straight up for the level 6 kill, but against any good Shadow Fiend, it's impossible to amass that quantity of gold because of the amount of regen Windranger will be faring. Analog's tip if you're playing Wind is to just rush a bottle and use the runes to mitigate the hardships of this matchup. The next two matchups we have to talk about are even stompier than Windranger. We'll start with Morphling, and yes, Morphling is not the most popular hero out there, but the whole thing about easy matchups is that you can identify your easy and then abuse it. This might be trivial if you're a Shadow Fiend spammer or a high MMR player, but a lot of players just play every lane the same, and we're here to change the mentality a little bit and educate you. So yeah, in this one we don't ward the lane. Morphling is almost a ranged hero, and we want him walking to the river to draw aggro so we can zap his ass with a lot of raises. The matchup starts kinda okay for Morphling. His base damage is really good in comparison to yours, as well as his attack speed, and at level 2 he has a reliable way to secure range creeps, but everything changes at level 3, literally. Analog gets level 3 and he just crushes the Morph. There's not much Morph can do against it. If he learns Waveform at level 2, he still gets mega punished when he goes for the range creep, and so he just watches every creep being denied. I think really good Morph players can probably adapt and have more strength to survive the raises, but that means less CS, still a ton of harass, and probably a lot of jungling. It's pretty clear at this point how much going for stats in lanes you have an advantage matters, so don't rush bottle, just get your Wave Pens. This will allow complete domination of the lane, enough mana to harass Morphling constantly, and that's it. As with any lane, paying attention to the runes so Morphling doesn't get a free regen after you crush him is important, and Morph will only have Waveform at least at level 4, so it's pretty easy to contest it, while he's also a really sluggish hero. He shouldn't be able to sneak any runes, especially because he shove waves and he barely does any AoE in the lane stage. In this clip, look how Analog, even after triple raising the Morphling, walks up so he cannot go back to the lane and get experience because he has the raise buff on him. Playing an easy matchup should always look like this, squeezing every ounce of advantage you have, not only for the mental damage, but because you want to get rewarded from actually understanding the matchup and picking accordingly. One thing I might have understated in this video is getting bottle. What I meant is that rushing it is not the ideal way to milk your advantage versus Morphling, but as we talked about, Morphling doesn't wave clear and he's low as hell, and SF does benefit from mana and runes, so in this matchup you do want to go for bottle after the Wraith Bends. It accelerates your jungle farm, and you can jungle farm versus a Morph because he doesn't wave clear as fast as you, because he has very few means to get runes before you and even interest of stealing them. In general, Morphling will have to accept his fate of jungling until 15 minutes with his Wraith Bends, and so you have free reign over everything. And while jungling is often hated in this channel, you can be damn sure that good Morphlings will jungle against you because that's the only thing they can do. Meepo is not necessarily weak versus Shadow Fiend as the game goes on, but boy, the lane can be hard for Meepo. This matchup is quite similar to Morphling in the sense of very low attack range, so you don't want a lane ward so he draws aggro against you. While the concept of the perfect level 1 lane is something to strive for, Meepo is melee, so as long as you can draw aggro correctly, you're not going to use as much mana as usual, unless you can also damage Meepo while draw aggro, or if you want to get range creep. One important tip versus Meepo that, while unreliable, is still worth being said, is to ask your supports to help you control the rune versus him. He has way better rune control against you, since he's literally 2 heroes, and thus he can easily acquire them without losing CS. Going back to the laning, you can constantly punish Meepo with raises while CS, but in general, you want to start ramping the pace at level 3 since you're doing way more damage and damaging 2 Meepos, since when he learns his ult, the other Meepo comes to HP, so it doesn't matter if you harass the first Meepo a lot. To explain your item build this game, I have to give you some context. Context that was given from Analog. From now, we cemented the idea that Wraith Bends are used when the lane is easy or when you feel no pressure, but that's not the case for Meepo. Why do you rush bottle versus Meepo even though this is in the easy category? Well, it's a lot of stuff. The best way to run SF versus Meepo is the magic build, because SF has no AoE physical damage, and he also has no burst physical damage. On the other hand, he has burst and AoE magic damage. The bottle makes way more sense when you're playing magic SF, and also the bottle gives you mana. On the hard matchups, you are rushing bottle because of the mana, yes, but also because of the HP. In this case, Meepo doesn't harass you enough for bottle, but you want to be full mana at all times, not only to pressure, but to not get pressured. While Meepo is an easy matchup, it doesn't mean he cannot kill you too. Good Meepos in fact might be able to bring you down, but it's less likely that they will when you're always full HP and with resources for triple raises. With that out of the way, your next item is boots, and the footage here shows it perfectly. Meepo is faster than you, and good Meepos will get bracers, and thus in almost no scenario, a triple raise will outsustain a Meepo instantly. That said, since Meepo is rushing bracers, he has no boots, and with boots on your hero, you can run him down for the 4th and 5th raises that you will have mana for because your first item was bottle. Your kill potential on Meepo starts at level 3, usually as with almost all heroes, and that's why getting boots is so important. Since this lane is so hard for the Meepo, he has to full-time jungle and address his tower once he pushes, and to clear wave and jungle the most effective, he needs lifesteal and poof. So he has to either choose to do jungling and wave clear less effectively by learning the net to stop you from running him down, or he has to risk it and see what happens. Boots also gives you better rune control and faster jungling, which is all you need in Magical Shadow Fiend. There is no need for Wraith Bands because Meepo's not going to be in the lane in the first place, at least if he's any good. Analog really recommends that you choose the magic build when playing Meepo, and if you destroy the lane with these tips, the game should be fairly easy. Also, if you destroyed a couple of games after watching this tutorial, consider contributing to our Patreon's goals. We are passionate about helping players and creating the best content we can, but that passion doesn't pay the bills just yet.